My name is Adam of Grayskull. When good is threatened by the power of Eternia,
Greetings, travelers. I'm your host, the C-Dot that knows a lot, Dr. Waluigi. After the poor performance of the film, the He-Man series was in hibernation for several years. There was a plan to make a sequel to the movie that would have included She-Ra, but Canon went bankrupt just after the movie was made. It wasn't until 1990 when a new company would make the first sequel series to the original. And how did this series hold up? Well, you know how a lot of people are saying that Masters of the Universe Revelations is the worst sequel that holds the name of He-Man, or lack thereof? This is worse, and the New Adventures of He-Man. The show was helmed by Jean Chalopin, who was a well-known producer on several classic 80s cartoons, including The Real Ghostbusters, Inspector Gadget, and Care Bears. He asked Lou Scheimer if he could get his blessing to write a sequel to He-Man, which he gave and got permission from Mattel to make the toy line and hired Jetlag Studios to do the animation, as well as Ocean Productions to do the voice work. I've already talked about Ocean and how the company was a big part of my childhood, with them voicing many animated series from Dragon Ball Z to Beast Wars. But Jetlag Studios is another story, as they were the company that was infamous in creating some of the most horrible, low-budget Disney rip-off animated movies. The series lasted one season with 65 episodes before it was cancelled, and the series was once again shelved until 2002. So not only do we have a show that was done by a company that is infamous for making crappy ripoffs, but is also known as the worst He-Man series of all time. This is going to hurt. The series follows Prince Adam, aka He-Man, played by Doug Parker and Gary Chalk, who is asked to come to the future by two guardians of the planet Primus, played by Scott McNeil and Don Brown, to help them fight off the villainous mutants invading forces led by Flog, played by Alvin Sanders. However, Skeletor, played by Campbell Lane, ends up coming and joins Flog to help the mutants conquer the planet of Primus. Can He-Man stop them, or will he fall to the invasion in his new adventures? As I mentioned before, the voices done in this series were by the guys from Ocean Productions, who would later go on to do the voices for Dragon Ball Z, Beast Wars, and the 2002 reboot of He-Man. While I would go into greater detail on the characters, I'm sad to say that the characters were written poorly, and it shows in their acting. While the cast was filled with great actors, you can tell they were putting in as little effort as possible with their performances. From our heroes to our villains, the cast either sounded bored or were trying to be as over the top as possible to at least get something out of the performance. And that's saying something compared to the original cast, which had more goofier performances, but at least I remembered them. Despite the show's lack of interest in characters, there is one thing this show does have that makes it better than the original, and that's the animation. While the original had stiff and repetitive animation, this show did improve upon that part of it by having some clean and fluid animation. However, as someone who thought that the original was unique from other cartoons at the time, this series is the exact opposite by using empty backgrounds, bland character designs, and took away a lot of the fun fantasy elements to make way for more sci-fi crap. Oh, where do I begin with this series? Well, let's start off by the fact that this series removes all of the fantasy elements and replaces it with nothing but sci-fi elements. That's right, this series is mostly focused on He-Man having adventures in space, to the point that they turned Skeletor into a mechanized Skeletor for all the little kiddies to play with. Speaking of which, the designs for these characters are absolutely ridiculous. Some of them are fine, like He-Man, but then you have some designs like Skeletor that make him look like, well, a Saturday morning cartoon. Even his new form isn't any better because he still has that same dumb expression on his face. From what I was able to find, the reason that Skeletor looks so doofy, a mix of dumb and goofy, was because the designers wanted to emulate the look of the movie version of Skeletor, as it was the most recent version of He-Man that people knew of. Well, I hate to tell you guys, but having Skeletor look like he's got permanent kissy lips is not something I want to think about when I think of someone called the Master of Evil. The only other thing I can think of that's more insulting is the treatment of the few original characters in the series. Yeah, besides He-Man and Skeletor, we have a few other characters from the original series, like He-Man's mother and father, who end up learning about a secret before he goes to the future, the sorceress who says that sending him to the future is a great idea, even though Skeletor is still around and that he could steal the power of Grayskull at any time. And the only character that just so happens to be the one you all know I hate, Teela. Originally, this character was going to be She-Ra, but the studio changed it to Teela, but never changed the animation design, so for one series, Teela was a blonde. But the most insulting part of this series is that they couldn't even get the phrase for the transformation right. Yeah, in the opening of the show, we hear Adam clearly say two things incorrectly. He says that he's from Grayskull, and he speaks the phrase by the power of Eternia. Did no one proofread this shit? This was one of the hardest shows I've ever had the pleasure of having to review. It took me 4 times to try and watch through this series, and every time I quit after 7 episodes. The writing is awful, the characters are bland as hell, and the animation for the time was good, but it is now lazy and underwhelming compared to other shows that have come out in modern day. I give The New Adventures of He-Man a 1 out of 10. If you love He-Man and want to see a sequel to the show, just stick with Revelations. It may not be as good as the original, but the alternative is a hell of a lot worse. Thanks for watching, I'm Dr. Waluigi, and remember, don't judge a book by its cover, because you'll never know what's inside. Good night, everyone.
My name is Adam of Grayskull. When good is threatened by the power of Eternia,